While Steven Spielberg's most popular animated productions in the 90s were Animaniacs and Tiny Toon Adventures, he had another animated show that may not have lasted as long as those, but nonetheless managed to retain a decent-sized following. Thanks to its oddball and unique brand of humor, Freakazoid was willing to go to some truly inspired places. What's interesting is it did not start life as a wacky comedy show. Spielberg was a fan of Batman the Animated Series and asked Bruce Timm to create a superhero show for Amblin Television. Timm, along with Paul Dini, came up with the idea for Freakazoid as a traditional superhero action show with comedic elements. Spielberg eventually took a shine to the more comic ideas, and Freakazoid started evolving into a crazy cartoon series. This was far away from Bruce Timm's own sensibilities, and he respectfully pulled out from the show, and Spielberg brought in Animaniacs creator Tom Ruegger to handle the further development and writing. The premise of Freakazoid revolves around a teenage boy, Dexter Douglas, who winds up transformed into a zany and meta-joke spewing superhero when he types in a specific computer code. Freakazoid does not follow any traditional rules, and has superpowers allow him to pull off many cartoon antics. Part of the joy of the series was the variety of stories Freakazoid would participate in, almost all of them ignoring the usual storytelling devices. Episodes would sometimes involve him going up against a villain, whether it was the Lobe or Armando Gutierrez, an evil CEO voiced with the right scenery chewing by Ricardo Montalban. However, these storylines would go into non-sequiturs and conclude in the most bonkers and inventive ways possible. The constant fourth wall breaking of the show was always an asset, with Freakazoid being well aware he was in a cartoon. He would often comment on this being a series on the WB network, and make other knowing winks to the entertainment industry. Anytime I read a story about a studio being sued for not paying an actor or filmmaker enough for that back-end deal, I immediately think of this line.
Always ask for a piece of the gross, not the net. The net is fantasy.
Of course, this element was also carried over from Animaniacs, but I love that Ruegger, Spielberg, and the rest of the production team did not mind potentially losing the audience with their Hollywood in-jokes and commentary. As long as the writers thought a gag was funny, they would find some way to include in the episode. If they wanted to do a 4-minute musical number parodying a scene from Hello Dolly, nothing was going to stop them. This also extended to some of the real-person cameos that appeared in Freakazoid. Film critic Leonard Maltin happily voiced himself at one point, and renowned carpenter Norm Abram got an entire episode devoted to him, because Saturday morning cartoons and PBS woodcarving shows clearly shared the same audience. My favorite cameo is from Jack Valenti, who interrupted the show a few times to explain the MPA rating system. They even managed to get Valenti to voice himself, probably thanks to Spielberg's connections. In one classic moment, Freakazoid has an argument with Wacko Warner and The Brain over which show is their bearded executive producer's favorite. The sketch ends in a funny way, with them meeting up with Spielberg, although Frank Welker did his voice here, as I don't think he saw himself as much of an actor. Freakazoid has its fair share of fun recurring characters too. Already mentioned a few of the villains, and there was also Fanboy. A character obsessed with popular culture, he would frequently get on Freakazoid's nerves with his ramblings about some subject. While certainly a stereotypical depiction of comic book and movie nerds, Fanboy actually comes across as rather pleasant compared to the fanboys lurking on the internet nowadays. At least he spends time talking about things he likes. Freakazoid would also hang out with a police sergeant named Cosgrove, voiced by the late great Ed Asner. His deadpan remarks and reactions were the perfect contrast to Freakazoid's zaniness, and his friendship with this wacky superhero was actually quite sweet. There was also Roddy McStew, an angry Scotsman who helps Freakazoid in his adventures. This was actually one of Craig Ferguson's first roles on American television, even predating his time on The Drew Carey Show, an example of the eye for talent the producers and casting directors had. Then there was Dexter Douglas' family, with his mother being the standout, thanks to Tress MacNeille's hilarious line deliveries. Of course, one of the key reasons the show worked was Paul Ruegger. I don't even know why it's taken me so long to mention him. Ruegger was one of the main writers that was instrumental in bringing forth the show's unfiltered sense of humor. When trying to find the right actor to voice Freakazoid, Ruegger gave his interpretation of how he felt the character should come across. Upon hearing his takes, Spielberg felt Ruegger himself brought the right sound and should voice the character. During the recording sessions, he would frequently improvise, and a lot of his ramblings would make it into the final episode. One of Freakazoid's finest moments, where he goes off on a creep, was originally much shorter and simpler, but Ruegger kept going, and a good amount was animated and aired. What the show proved surprisingly prescient on was the depiction of the internet. The World Wide Web was still largely in its infancy at that point, and was promoted as the information superhighway that would help connect people and bring news and facts to people much faster. Freakazoid instead presented the idea that the internet would be similar to this cartoon superhero, a place where any odd idea would flourish, a lot of rules would be ignored, and people got really into referencing some random piece of pop culture history. You cannot spend a few minutes on some corner of the internet without a scene from The Simpsons or SpongeBob SquarePants or Star Trek being turned into a meme. I've even witnessed a scene from the 70s Disney comedy The Shaggy DA and a one-off gag from the 1941 Bugs Bunny cartoon Wabbit Trouble turned into a meme. So it makes perfect sense for Freakazoid to bring up F-Troop all of a sudden. While these elements helped the show develop a significant following of adult viewers, the WB was not pleased with its ratings. The series did do well with college students and older viewers who appreciated its offbeat sensibilities, and Paul Rudd has even revealed it was popular in prisons. Unfortunately, the executives lacked much enthusiasm for it and felt not enough children were watching, so kept moving it around the schedule. At several points, the writers expected Freakazoid to be cancelled, which was partly why they weren't afraid to go in such wild directions. After all, they're probably going to yank us off the air anyway. Thankfully, Freakazoid would find a bigger audience with reruns on Cartoon Network and the DVDs. Many have wondered if the series will ever return, and with Steven Spielberg reviving Animaniacs and putting a new Tiny Toons into production, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. Like I said, the show's meme-style humor is perfectly in line with modern sensibilities, and there's so much you can now comment on with a superhero who resides on the internet. The rise of social media platforms like Twitter and Facebook, and superhero franchises becoming bigger and more humongous presents a lot of potential for Freakazoid. Owing to the series' longevity, the characters even appeared on a recent episode of Teen Titans Go. Paul Rudd reprised the role and still shows a lot of enthusiasm for it. He has announced he recorded lines for the next season of Animaniacs, so maybe he slipped to Spielberg the idea of returning Freakazoid to the airwaves. Showing up on a streaming service would certainly be thematically appropriate. In the end, it has successfully stood the time as a hilarious series that was willing to try all sorts of bonkers jokes, whether it broke the fourth wall or just had random characters suddenly show up in a scene. It may have been cancelled too soon, but Freakazoid has now earned its place as one of the most celebrated cartoon shows of the 90s. See you next time.